On this episode of the NESN Patriots podcast, we break down another disastrous loss for the Patriots, talk about who should start next weekend, whether it should be Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones, and we have a discussion about New England's current draft position and all the options that they could have at the top of the draft board. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NESN Patriots podcast. We are coming to you a day after the New England Patriots invented another way to lose, suffering a 10-7 loss to the New York Giants in a game that somehow lived up to the hype, if you can call it that. It was as ugly as we all expected it would be, maybe even worse. This was a game that they, again, probably should have won. Mac Jones got benched at halftime. Bailey Zappi wasn't much better in the second half, and yet the Patriots had an opportunity to kick a game-tying field goal with from 35 yards out with just a few seconds left that would have sent the game to overtime. But Chad Ryland sent it wide left, and now the Patriots are 2-9, and they have somehow fallen to even further into the depths of irrelevance and despair. I guess, Zach, I don't really know what else we can say about this game because of how bad it was, but just what was your overarching takeaway as you were driving through the rain on the way home from New Jersey last night?
Yeah, that rainy drive was not great. It was not an enjoyable trip down 84 and the Pike and all those random back roads in Connecticut.
When I was driving through, I was a couple hours ahead of you, and it started to rain, and me and my wife said to each other, that's going to suck for Zach because this rain's getting progressively worse and he's got to drive through the worst of it. But
it rained nonstop from MetLife Stadium all the way back to Boston for me. So that was a fitting end to a very ugly day of football. As you mentioned, saying this game lived up to the hype sounds very strange, but it really did. It was as ugly as we were expecting it might be based on where these two franchises are. And the fact that the Patriots just, as you mentioned off the top, they continue to find new and inventive ways to lose football games. I went through it this morning. Their 9 losses this season. I think one of them was probably just a standard garden variety, whatever, blah kind of loss. And that was the loss to the Dolphins in Miami. Nothing really crazy about that game. It's just, they were outplayed by a better team. They made some mistakes. They lose in a place that they always lose. Basically, every other loss this season had either some sort of ridiculous play at the end, or they just got flat blown out to the point that we've never really seen before, referring to the Cowboys games and the Saints games. Last 2 weeks, you get a red zone interception from Mac Jones. You get a missed field goal from Chad Ryland at the end of this game. Patriots are a bad team. That's becoming increasingly evident by the week. Rock bottom continues to get lower and lower and lower. I looked back at some of my old stories earlier. I called the loss to the Saints, which I believe was in week 5. I called that a rock bottom loss for the Patriots, and it's gotten substantially worse since then. Patriots lost back-to-back games despite allowing just 10 points in both of them. NFL teams this season are 50-2 when they allow 10 or fewer points. The Patriots are the 2, and both of those came in back-to-back weeks. They're the first team to lose 2 such games in a row in 30 years since the 1993 Patriots, who had Scott Sekulies at quarterback at the time. There are just endless amounts of insult stats for this Patriots team right now. And the baffling thing is we still have 6 more games to go, and it could continue to get even worse.
Well, I'm just looking at it now as you were bringing it up, the creative ways they've lost this season. A couple of those or 3 of those weren't really that close. The second Dolphins loss, as you said, and then the Saints and Cowboys games were total blowouts. But the other 6 were totally winnable games. 5 points to the Eagles, 1 touchdown to the Dolphins. Again, we know what happened at the end of those games. The Patriots were right there, had an opportunity to win those games. The Raiders game, 4 points with Parker dropping the pass at the end of that game. The Commanders with Juju having the ball go off his hands at the end for the interception. The Colts, the Mac Jones pick. And then yesterday, the Chad Ryland missed field goal. Those are all very close games, very winnable. Those are 6 games. Again, I think the Patriots have very much earned their 2-9 record, but you don't have to squint that much to see a world in which they somehow had, I don't know, 7 wins this season, just based on how close some of those games have been. And this goes back all the way to last year too, on both sides, not just, winnable games that they lost, but also, excruciating fashion, losing these games. The season finale to Buffalo was a game that I think they led at halftime, and they absolutely, played well enough in some respects to win that game, but gave up the 2 long kickoffs for touchdowns. The Cincinnati Bengals game where they came back and almost won, but Ramondre Stevenson fumbled at the goal line. Obviously, we know what happened in Vegas with Jacoby Myers. The Minnesota Vikings with a Hunter Henry reversal on that call. So it's just like, it's this pattern of a franchise that once used to always, find ways to win and close out winnable games, now is doing the exact opposite on both fronts. And also at the same time, being a team that used to succeed or excel after Thanksgiving and finish season strong, now it gets progressively worse as the season goes on.
And we touched on it last week. The Patriots they picked the worst possible season to have their worst possible season. You just look at how the AFC is right now. The Colts, who we watched 2 weeks ago, who are not a very good team, would be in the playoffs if the season ended today. The Broncos, who started 0-5, 1-5, gave up 70 points early in the year. They're a tiebreaker out of a playoff spot. The Texans are a tiebreaker out of a playoff spot. The Bills are 10th in the conference right now. They're not even in the playoffs. Cincinnati's down with no Joe Burrow. It's just a wide open AFC right now. And we've talked about it before. You turn even 3 or 4 of those 1-score games into wins, and the Patriots are very much right in the playoff mix. But the further we get down this road of this season, the more kind of irrelevant that all seems, because the Patriots, they've been close in a lot of these games, but they're just not a good team right now, especially offensively. This offense is just completely and totally broken. And the crazy part is, though, they've actually run the ball very well in each of the last 2 games, and they've still only scored 1 touchdown in those games and have lost games where they've allowed 10 points. It's, I don't know. It's just it's a roster building issue. It's a quarterbacking issue. It's a talent issue. It's a coaching issue. It's all across the board. The Patriots are just a bad team right now. And I wouldn't argue with anybody who says they are the absolute worst team in the NFL right now. I'd probably say they're like the 2nd or 3rd worst, but they are very, very much in that conversation.
Yeah, I thought the Giants were the worst, and they just lost to the Giants. So I think it's between them and the Panthers at this point.
Essentially,
at least the Panthers have, you say what you want about Bryce Young, but he's still obviously talented. I think, to your point about just how this season has played out in the AFC and the missed opportunity for the Patriots. Coming out of training camp, how we all felt about this team and how they could be. None of us were picking Super Bowl champions, but I think, a lot of us had them right around 9-8. I was thinking 10-7. I think that's where a lot of us stood. Maybe that was just because in training camp, at least, the offense looked so much more functional than it did the previous training camp under Matt Patricia. As it's turned out, it's even worse than it was in the regular season under Patricia, which is crazy. But, you looked at that team and you said, I think they could be 9-8. I think maybe best case scenario 10-7, but you looked at it and said, even if they do reach that, it's probably only good enough to maybe get into the playoffs, maybe win 1 playoff game if you get lucky, but no more than that. But the way the season's gone out, if the Patriots had turned out to be that team that we thought they could be, that would
be like the number 2 seed right now.
Yeah. And if they wouldn't be the number 2 seed, that you'd be able to make a case for them, like, I think they could beat the Chiefs in the AFC title game, because the Chiefs not any good, but are vulnerable. So you're right. It's just a huge missed opportunity for the Patriots on all fronts. I think we're going to spend the back half of this episode focusing in on the draft, because I think that's really the only interesting thing to talk about at this point. But I do quickly want to go through some more game recap and talk about the quarterback situation briefly. We try our best to come up with 2 up and 2 down, and most of these episodes, even if it's really hard to find 4 positives for the Patriots. I'll start with you, Zach. Who are your 2 up for the Patriots in this game?
2 up. I mentioned it earlier. Patriots ran the ball very well in this game. Ramondre Stevenson, I would definitely put in the up category. Just fell just short of his first 100-yard game of the season, 21 carries, 98 yards, 1 touchdown, 4.7 yards per carry. Also a pretty good game for Ezekiel Elliott, 9 for 46, 5.1 yards per carry. Both of those guys chipped in a little bit in the passing game as well. It's it's baffling that the Patriots finally have found something that works with their offense, and it's coincided with probably, if not their two worst offensive performances of the season, definitely two of their worst offensive performances. You can run the ball as much as you want. If your passing game is as bad as the Patriots, then it doesn't really matter. And then over on the other side, Jabril Peppers, he's around the ball again, making plays again. We talked last week or 2 weeks ago about how pretty much every Patriots turnover this season has involved either Jabril Peppers or Jelani Tavai. It was Peppers in this game. He recovered the fumble on the Giants' first possession, also had a sack. I believe it was one drive later. He's still playing hard. He's one of the guys on this defense that's still kind of bringing it every game, every play. He plays pretty much every play for this defense. Going to be really interesting to see over these final 6 weeks whether that buy-in sticks, whether that's if this defense eventually just reaches a breaking point and says, I don't know what to do. We're allowing 10 points a game and the offense still can't score, whether you start to see some of that down the stretch. But there's still some players on that defense that are playing pretty good football.
Yeah, definitely. For me, my two up are Christian Barmore and Keon White with a nod to Anthony Jennings as well. This was just another great game for Christian Barmore. He had the one sack. I think he had 3 tackles, but just, consistently was in the backfield, consistently generating pressure and being a force. This is like 5 games in a row now. I mean, I think he absolutely is sort of making his case as, one of the best, not just young interior defenders in the league, but, if he keeps this up, he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He's getting healthy. He's playing great every week. It's really a huge silver lining for them. And also Keon White, I don't think he played a ton. He didn't have huge numbers. He had the 1 sack. I think he had maybe a couple pressures, but I just thought, there were a couple plays, at least in the press box, where he really popped. And we've been waiting to see more of that from him this season. It's been a little touch and go. I just think it's been really a playing time issue. But I thought, he popped with his limited opportunities. And yeah, Anthony Jennings, I think PFF had him for 6 pressures and 2 sacks. I think he's been really good this season. I think the Patriots, going into the offseason, I don't know, if they look at it this way, but if they're thinking re-sign Josh Uche or re-sign Anthony Jennings, I think it's a no-brainer at this point, at least with the way what they like from their edge players. I think it's Anthony Jennings. So those players really stood out for me. And for
I would say quickly on Jennings, of the 4 draft picks from that year that are going to hit free agency between Jennings, Uche, Kyle Duggar, and Michael Wenu, I say as long as some part of this coaching regime stays the same and their priorities stay the same, I think Jennings has by far the best chance of those 4 guys to re-sign just based on the value and how well he has played this year.
Yeah, I think, his stock is probably the highest, or at least it's the arrow is pointing the most steeply upward. I'm not finding the good words, but it's kind of been a disappointing season for Duggar, and Wenu's dealt with injuries. He's been really good since he got to right tackle, but just for someone who's really improved their stock the most, I guess is the way to phrase it, I think it's definitely him. You're right. What about for you with your 2 down? I think we all know who the first one's going to be.
Yeah, 2 down. I'll combine 2 of them into one. I'll put Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi both into that category. Mac Jones started this game. The Patriots did some weird stuff with the quarterback position all week. There were reports that they split reps pretty close to 50-50. Bill Belichick has pushed back on that a little bit. He said this morning that Mac got the majority of practice reps leading up to this game, but Bill Belichick did not inform any of the players on the team about who would be starting until late in the week. Again, we don't know exactly when that announcement came. Belichick just said that it was before they traveled down to New Jersey for this game. Mac Jones ended up starting, and he looked terrible. This was one of his worst halves that I've seen him play. He had 2 interceptions, both of which were just emblematic of all the same mistakes that he's been making all season, getting scared by pressure, throwing off his back foot. Had some weird throws to Mike Gesicki that looked like they just weren't on the same page. I don't know exactly what happened there. He fumbled once. The Patriots were able to recover it. He had a delay of game penalty, almost had 1 or 2 others that I think he was fortunate to get away with. And then the Patriots yanked him out of the game at halftime, put Bailey Zappi in. Zappi, I don't think, looked appreciably better. He basically exclusively relied on throws at or behind the line of scrimmage. Also had a very bad interception on a play that was basically identical to Mac Jones' first interception. We've said it for weeks now. We'll get into it a little bit more later. Patriots don't have any good options at quarterback right now, but after this latest benching, I don't know how they can go back to Mac Jones this week against the Chargers. And my other down, I'm going to go over on the defensive side. One player that I did not really like what I saw from in this game was JC Jackson. I think he was the clear negative for this defense in the game, obviously coming off the essentially a pseudo suspension. I don't know what you exactly want to call it, where the Patriots told him not to travel with the team to Germany after he was late to curfew the week before. He did have one pass breakup in this game, but gave up a couple big plays to Jalen Hyatt. Badly missed a tackle right before the Giants' only touchdown of this game. Had he made that tackle, they probably settle for a field goal in that situation because it was on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 10, I believe. Just wasn't an especially impressive effort from Jackson, who was basically back to a full starter's workload in this game.
Yeah, he was bad. And he has been bad since he got here on and off the field. I don't know what else to say about it at this point. And on Mac, yeah, again, it's just kind of reached the point where there's not a whole bunch to add to it. I think it's like maybe the most glaringly obvious case of the yips for a quarterback that I've seen in a while. Like it has to. I mean, it's a weird. I never know how to talk about that because it's not like that's a diagnosable term. And it's just kind of an entirely subjective opinion when you look at someone and you think they have the yips and whatever that means, and it's different for different sports. We know what it really looks like in baseball, especially with pitchers. It's a little bit more different with in the NFL, especially with quarterbacks, because it really, there's so many factors at play. But it looks to me like he has the yips and is just completely broken with no confidence, and he's just got to sit for a while and detach. I'd also just, not let we try not to bring our personal feelings into this very much, but I do think it's fair to say, like, you do feel bad for him on some level. Like, it's not an easy thing to watch. Like, he's a human being, obviously. I thought Boomer Esiason had an interesting comment on the Greg Hill show today over at EEI. He was talking about Mac Jones and said he needs a new place. He has to try to start over somewhere as far away from the Patriots as he possibly can. It's really unfortunate. It's a hard thing to watch. It's a hard thing to watch a young man go through. He's living out his dream, but his dream has turned into the ultimate nightmare. And it's true. I mean, Mac Jones is someone who wanted to, obviously, his dream is being an NFL quarterback. He was a top draft pick, did the whole thing. And now he is, maybe him and along with Zach Wilson, like a punchline. He is the biggest maybe the biggest punching bag in the NFL for a variety of reasons. So, I just, you do feel bad for him on some level for that.
Yeah, and it's clear that he's a guy that works hard. It's not like based on all accounts, based on everything we've heard, it's not like he's going out there and slacking off on the practice field, and that's why he's performing the way that he is. And obviously, we all saw him play in 2021. He looked like a completely and totally different player that year than he does now. I think the Patriots and Bill Belichick obviously deserve a lot of criticism and blame for the way that his career has panned out. Not saying that Jones is completely blameless there, because I think there are some things that he should have handled differently than he did. And now he is the one making these mistakes on the field. So you do have to give a fair portion of blame to him. But just with the infrastructure they put around him, with the changing of offensive coordinators, with the seemingly unnecessary Bill Belichick stuff, with not endorsing him as a starter last year, basically refusing to praise him at all for almost all of last season, doing the weird thing this week where he said, I don't know who's going to start. It just seems unnecessary, and it doesn't seem like the best way to handle a guy whose confidence, even though every time we ask Mac Jones about his confidence, he says, no, I'm fully confident in myself. It's clear on the field that he is not, that like he's not making the plays that he is fully capable of making, just because of the burden of everything from the past 2 years that's seemingly stacking up on him. I still think he can be a half decent NFL quarterback if he gets some time to sit back and recover and recuperate and rehab his game a little bit. But I don't think that's going to happen here. I agree with Boomer on that. I think he needs to. He's the the picture perfect classic case of a needs a change of scenery kind of guy. Send him to be a backup with the Rams or the 49ers or somebody, and I think he can get back to being a solid player. But yeah, at the moment, he just looks completely and totally broken.
Yeah, agreed. My two down are the missed tackles. Like, it's just been an issue basically ever since, starting with the week 4 loss to Dallas, when Jalen Mills and I forget who else, a couple guys missed tackles on that opening drive for the Cowboys, and it really just hasn't gotten any better. It pops up every week. It popped up again on Sunday when Jonathan Jones missed the tackle on, I forget who scored the touchdown for the Giants.
Isaiah Hodgins.
That's right. So, and there were other missed tackles throughout the game. Miles Bryant had one. It's just you wonder, obviously, if part of that is an effort issue, guys making business decisions, but I don't think that was the case back in week 4. And the Patriots harp on this in practice as long as Bill Belichick is their head coach. So I don't know what's going on there, if it's just bad technique, if it's a talent issue, if it's poor coaching, poor effort, all of it. But the missed tackles are just insane at this point. And then the other one for me, just special teams, weekly appearance. Now, I thought Bryce Behringer had a pretty good game, but we say it every week. You can bank on 1 to 2, if not more, bad plays from the special teams unit every game. And you got in this game once again. You got the Chad Ryland missed field goal. Demario Douglas muffed a punt. It didn't cost him, but it could have. I mean, it bounced around a little bit before rolling out of bounds. And then I forget what the penalty was, but there was like a 15-yard penalty after a kick. Where
was
the
it
Patriots...
Keon White? I think it was like an unnecessary roughness.
Yeah,
I want to say, yeah.
Yeah,
that backed the offense back up to the 8-yard line, I believe. It was definitely inside the 10. Yeah.
And again, like, that's the kind of stuff that just can't happen with this offense. I mean, it's one thing when you have an offense where you're like, whatever, like, they're backed up to the 5, like, they're out of Tom Brady, they're going to score anyway, but they just can't afford those kind of mistakes with the team that they have. So yeah, another bad day for the special teams. Somehow, some way, the Patriots dedicated, hired Bill O'Brien to fix the offense. The offense is worse than it was under Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. They put Joe Judge back on special teams to fix special teams. They invested in it with guys like Chris Board and drafting players for special teams. And the special teams is worse than it was last season, maybe the worst in the league. It's bad.
The Ryland thing is becoming a problem. I know there are ways of sort of explaining away and excusing some of the issues that he's had this season. He hasn't gotten a chance to kick a ton of field goals. There have been some bad weather
in the NFL. Shout around third fewest field goal attempts.
Third fewest field goals in the NFL. Obviously, the weather conditions weren't great in this game yesterday. But if you're an NFL kicker, you need to make a 35-yard field goal. I don't care if it's in a tornado. You need to be able to do that. And Chad Ryland failed to do that in back-to-back weeks. Both of those were extremely costly. This one obviously would have forced overtime. If he'd made the one against the Colts, then the calculus of some of those final drives would have been very different. Bill Belichick called him out more aggressively than we've seen him call out a player in a while. When he was speaking, I believe that was on EEI this morning. He said Chad's a very talented player, but we've essentially missed extra points in back-to-back games now. He needs to be better. And yeah. It's true. I mean, right now Ryland is second to last in the NFL among qualified kickers in field goal success rate, 70.6. The Nick Folk conversation is a little tricky because I think everybody who's saying Nick Folk was great, why didn't you just keep him? Why would you want to draft another kicker and try to replace him? I understood pretty fully why they wanted to replace Nick Folk. 1, he's 39 years old. 2, he showed some signs of decline last season. And 3, he can't kick off, which hurt the Patriots multiple times late last year. So I didn't hate the move of trying to get a replacement in there. But you trade up to draft a guy in the 4th round. He has not performed anywhere close to the level that you expect a player in that position to perform. And Nick Folk has made 95% of his field goals for Tennessee this season. So I get the calculus of it, but it has turned out very, very poorly for the Patriots. Yeah.
And it's just, I agree. At the end of the day, like, you have to make that kick that he missed yesterday, and there's no excusing it. The only thing I would say for Chad Ryland is, kickers are weird, right? And any little thing can sort of swing their confidence one way or the other. I do think there's something to the fact that, wasn't it? I don't think he had a field goal attempt until week 3, because the Patriots multiple times in those first two games, elected to go for it on fourth down, and they didn't get it, or they turn it over in the red zone. And so, I think it's possible that on some level, he's gotten so few opportunities that now every time he gets one, it's in his head like, I haven't had any times to get out here. I got to miss this. And he's putting too much pressure on himself. I think most of his misses have come from 45 or beyond. He's had very few gimmies. Like you'd think maybe, if they sent him out there for early in the season for a few of those 35, 40-yard kicks, get a few of those under his belt, gets his confidence going, gets in a groove, and go from there. Never really had that. It was just no kicking and then a bunch of kicking from 50 plus with mixed results, and then not a lot of action in between. And then now he finally gets a layup opportunity in crunch time and he misses it. Just like the whole team doesn't look comfortable. He also doesn't look comfortable. But you worry about it because it's like kickers are fickle. Like he might never get his confidence back. So he's got to start making these soon.
Yep. Agreed.
So, real quick, Mac Jones, or not Mac Jones, who do you think should start this Sunday against the Chargers? Throwback day for the Patriots. They're wearing their red uniforms. Hooray.
Hey, there'll at least be something attractive to look at in this game. Probably not so much the product on the field, but I do love the red jerseys. I think you have to start Zappe this week. I don't think he's a great option. I don't expect him to play especially well, but I just think that Mac Jones is actively hurting the team every time that he's on the field. Again, I still think that there's a chance down the line he can get back to being a respectable player. He's not there right now. The Patriots have given him chances in the last couple of weeks, and he's just continued to make the same catastrophic mistakes. You bench him before a 2-minute drive in one game that you lost by one score. You take him out at halftime of another game that you lost by one score. I just think you need to make a change. I know that might be kind of simplistic thinking, but it's very clear that he's just not in a place where he can get that job done right now. I'm curious what would you put the odds at whether a quarterback who is not currently on the Patriots roster appears in a game before the end of the season? Because I can see them putting in Bailey Zappe and him being similarly terrible, and then it hitting week 15 and they say, we just need to get somebody in who's going to be able to hand the ball off and complete a couple passes and not throw these like remarkably bad interceptions.
I say 0%. I think just because like, 5%, with the 5% being Will Grier returning to the practice squad today. I mean, we find out at 4:00 whether he cleared waivers and if he comes back. So by the time people are hearing this, we might have our answer on that. But maybe there's still a path for that to be Will Grier. I don't know. Just as a practice squad elevation. But then even in that case, he'd probably still be the third quarterback. So who knows? I personally think there's a better chance of them if we're still in week 15 and there are 3 games left to go. And it's just, you can't do either Jones or Zappe. I think, maybe they do just give Malik Cunningham a shot. I know he said he hasn't worked a quarterback since the Vegas week. He is a receiver. Like that's what they've said. That's what I view him as, but who knows at this point? But I just don't know, like to what end, and especially like if you're Kraft, like, and it's there's 3 weeks left or so, and you're like, we're right there for a number 2 pick. Why are you trying to bring in somebody that could add a spark? Just like play it out, so that's what I think. And as far as who I think should start, I don't know. I agree with you. Like it should be Bailey Zappe. But like the nihilist in me, which is like, what do you care how this looks or how the results are, says like, and what do you care how Mac Jones feels on the sideline? Like throw him out there, see if by some chance he figures it out and he increases his draft stock. So maybe you can get a 5th round pick instead of a 6th round pick in a trade in the offseason. Like there's really no downside to continue to play him at this point. Like maybe he figures it out, maybe he improves his trade value. Like I mean, I guess it depends on what the goal is, if it's winning games or secretly tanking. I don't know. It's a weird place for them to be in, but like I would probably throw him back out there, but I ultimately agree with you. Like it has to be Zappe at this point.
It just seems like it's been spiraling toward this point for a couple of weeks now. And I mean, I said last week that there's no way they can start Mac Jones after pulling him before a 2-minute drive. And then they started Mac Jones the very next game. So would it shock me if it's Mac Jones again this week? No, not at all, really. But I don't know. It seems like they have to have seen enough by now to say this guy is being actively detrimental to our team. And I also think you can play Zappe and still expect to lose most of the games that you're going to play. Maybe do it in a slightly less embarrassing fashion. I don't know. It depends on what their priorities are, I guess. But yeah, it's I don't know how they can keep running him out there at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. I want to spend the rest of this just talking draft because that's all there is left to talk about. So who's playing tonight? Vikings, Bears. So that won't have any direct result on the Patriots draft standing, but it obviously is worth keeping an eye on.
Good for the Patriots if the Bears continue to win.
Right.
Most likely. I mean, obviously the strength of schedule stuff is hard to even discuss because it's so in the weeds, but basically the Bears are one of those teams that's in the general vicinity of those top couple of picks. Obviously they do have the Carolina Panthers pick as well, but their own pick is most likely going to be somewhere in or around that top 5.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you're a Patriots fan, you absolutely are rooting for Chicago to win this game because that will give Chicago 4 wins. Not to go too far down the strength of schedule rabbit hole. However, the gap between the Patriots and the Bears is so wide in favor of Chicago that if the Patriots and Bears were to finish tied, there's almost no chance that the Patriots would get the higher pick in that scenario. So you want the Bears to stay clear of New England. So the Bears win tonight. They have 4 wins. The Patriots only have 2. Do the Patriots have 2 wins in them the rest of the season? It's hard for me to find those. I think the only ones I look at are the Jets game and the finale, depending on who's a quarterback, and maybe the Steelers game. But if you're a Patriots fan, if they don't win 2 games, they're pretty much guaranteed at this point to have a top 4 pick.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so right now they're 2-9. They have the number 3 overall pick in the draft. They do currently have the strength of schedule edge over the Cardinals, who are 2-10, and they are going to bye in 2 weeks after visiting the Steelers next weekend. So, like, it basically, the way I look at it, and I think this is right, is if the Patriots lose to the Chargers this weekend and the Cardinals lose to the Steelers and then go on their bye, and then the Patriots then lose to the Steelers while the Cardinals are on a bye, both teams at that point are 2-11. And I think the way the strength of schedule plays out, Patriots are basically guaranteed to have the number 2 spot at that point. We'll see what happens. But my real question for you, Zach, is if the Patriots don't get one of these top 3 picks, which would give them the opportunity to draft Caleb Williams or Drake May or Marvin Harrison, what do you think they should do at that point? Let's just say it's number 4, because that is probably the most likely low spot for them. Number 4. Are you of the mindset of trade down and maximize the value, take the tackle in that spot, or do you look at a splash pick, someone like the tight end from Georgia, Brock Bowers, who a lot of people have as like maybe 4th or 5th overall on their big boards? Where would you go if the Patriots fall out of the top 3, which most people view as a sort of no man's land given where they're at?
It obviously depends on what is being offered and how they feel about these prospects and yada, yada, yada. There are a lot of caveats there. I think if they get the 4th overall pick, they haven't picked in the top 5 in a very, very long time. Usually the caliber of prospect you can get in that range is substantially higher than you can get, say, at 10 or 11. So even if you finish as a mediocre team, it's a lot more difficult to get one of those absolute top end blue chip type prospects. And if the Patriots view, say, the tackle from Penn State as somebody who is in that tier, then I would be skeptical about trading down and kind of doing the Patriot thing where you trade down to, I don't know, number 9, maybe add an extra 2nd round pick and do that kind of draft day finagling, which worked for a long time for the Patriots. Hasn't really worked out well in many years. I think the first pick for the Patriots, it's got to be quarterback, wide receiver, or offensive tackle. There are talented players at all three of those spots at the top of this year's draft. Those are the clear, far and away biggest needs on this Patriots team, in my opinion. Yeah, there's some other holes that they have to patch, but they cannot trade down to number 7 and then draft the best defensive end on the board. I just do not think they can do that. I don't think Robert Kraft will allow them to do that, honestly.
Which, for those at home, the best edge defender, I think most people agree in this draft, is Layatu Latu out of UCLA. That's kind of the guy who's at the top of that ranking.
And there is we were talking with Alex Barth from 98.5 in the media room the other day. What's the guy from Iowa? There's an edge rusher from Iowa who has, I have to look it up, Cooper DeJean, I think his name is, who checks like every single possible Bill Belichick box.
He's a corner, Cooper DeJean.
Oh, he's the corner. Yes, yeah, he's the he's the kind of player that in a typical year you could say, oh, the Patriots are absolutely going to get this guy at like number 17. I don't think they can do that this year. They need to draft for need, because those 3 needs are just so significant and they have been so catastrophically detrimental to their team this year. I think if they come out of if they get a top 5 pick and come away with one of those premier quarterbacks, a Marvin Harrison Jr., or one of those elite tackles, I think that's a pretty solid haul for the Patriots. And then obviously you look in their second pick, whenever that comes, be it early in the second round, maybe trading back into the first round. Then you say, okay, we got to find a quarterback, and okay, we got to get a receiver at some point. But it's going to be interesting, though. We were talking about before this. I feel like people look at the draft now in late November and they think, oh, wow, well, it's guaranteed to be Caleb Williams and Drake May 1-2. So once you get beyond that, then you have to have different options. I don't think that's necessarily the case. It seems like every year we say, oh, well, these guys are the clear top prospects, with the exception of a guy like Trevor Lawrence or somebody like that, or an Andrew Luck, who is the absolute clear cut number 1, always going to be number 1 pick. There's a lot of movement in the draft, both between the bowl season, the Senior Bowl, the combine, team visits, pro days, all that stuff. There is so much time for players to move up or down the board. And you're already seeing it a little bit with someone like Jalen Daniels, who the quarterback from LSU that a lot of people now like for the Patriots. He was considered maybe a fringy first round pick like a week ago. And now you're seeing mock drafts of people saying he might go number 4 overall. So long story short, I think I don't think it's going to be as chalk as a lot of people think. I think there's a lot of time for things to change, especially because people have already begun knocking some of what Caleb Williams and Drake May have done between the on-field perspective and some of the Caleb Williams media stuff, the crying on the field in the stands. Like, there's a lot of time for things to change here.
That crying thing was lame and bogus. And I'm sorry, I don't think you can make too much of that crying thing. That was weird. Maybe it's just like that's the current generation of player, and we're the jerks. But I'm sorry, crying.
It was weird. It was weird.
Bad look. That's
yes. So what's your feeling? How are you feeling about this pick?
Well, first of all, I think I'm not going to say you're lying, but I think if you're being honest from a selfish perspective, we all know what you really want to happen, and that is for the Patriots to trade down, get whatever they get, but ultimately land somewhere around 9, 10, 11 and draft Kool-Aid McKinstry, the corner out of Alabama, so you can plug him right into your all-name team.
I've been waiting for this day for about 3 years. I saw him play as a freshman, and I was like, man, he's going to be 2024 all-name team all-star. We got some good ones in this first round, too. I was looking through them the other day. But, yeah, you can't beat really Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Cameron Kitchens is a fun one. Chop Robinson is a good one. Let's see. Jerzon Newton is just kind of different. Malik Neighbors is fun.
Malik Neighbors is a good one.
And also, it would be very Patriots on multiple levels to take Layatu Latu with that top pick, or 4th, 5th overall or whatever, just because fits the defensive profile. But also, how many Polynesian or Samoan or I forget the technical term, some
Pacific Islander.
Pacific Islander. How many of those do they have on the team? They have Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, Antonio Mafi, Jelani Tavai. At various times, they've had Justice Tavai. Probably forgetting a couple.
Daniel Aquale is in there.
Daniel Quale.
I think there's one or two others too. Yeah.
Yeah, that they have to lead the NFL in Pacific Islanders on the roster, so they could just plug him right in. But for me, I think it's tricky and it's hard to talk about right now solely because we don't know what's going to happen with the other quarterbacks. So like we know that Williams and May, for the most part, are probably going to go somewhere in the top 3, maybe top 4. That you said, who knows what can happen. But I think that the wild cards here are Daniels and Michael Penix out of Washington. What ends up being the thoughts on those players as we get closer to the draft? Do they rise up the draft boards like a lot of quarterbacks seem to right before the draft? Do they stay kind of where they're at? Like right now, Tankathon's mock draft has Penix at 21 and Jaden Daniels at number 7. And so, then you just start having, you kind of get into a different sort of ballpark there. If you're the Patriots and you're at number 4, you could very easily trade down. Let's say you take Penix at let's say 15, you can get him. And then you have another first round pick in the sort of later in the first round. And maybe you get a good receiver, whether that's Xavier Worthy out of Texas. I don't know if I doubt that. I can never pronounce his name. Romeo Odunes out of Washington. But maybe you can somehow pair Odunes and Penix coming out of college. I think, Patriots fans would be excited about that one.
I will say we're in a very weird mock draft period. Because I was looking at some of them to prepare for this episode here. We're in the point where the people that actually know what they're talking about, that have been studying college football all year, that have been making these mock drafts for a couple months now, they're at the point where they're sort of getting bored and trying to do some kind of experimental stuff. Like I read one today from Chris Trapasso over at CBS Sports, who does great work with all this stuff. He's always one of the ones I follow going up to draft time. He had a mock draft today that was just, hey, so what if a quarterback doesn't go number 1? Like how would it shake out that way? So we're getting into that like experimental point with the people who actually know what they're talking about these players. And we're also getting to the point where everybody else is starting to make mock drafts just because people love mock drafts. Mock drafts traffic very well on websites. I will say that we would fall into that latter group if we were making mock drafts right now. This is just, I feel like people will see a mock draft on Twitter and be like, oh my God, there's a chance that Joe Alt can go number 1. Like, whoa, what's going on there? So much of this is just rampant and wild speculation. I would say 90% of this is rampant and wild speculation. So just, right. I know this is much earlier than both us as Patriots reporters and you all as Patriots fans are used to jumping into this whole draft process, but cool your jets a little bit on some of these projections and whatnot, because the draft is 5-6 months away. A lot is going to change between now and then.
Yeah. And so I guess I danced around the question earlier or before. So I guess I'll give my real answer. If the Patriots land the number 4 overall pick, I'm drafting Joe Alt, who is 6'8", 315 pounds. I mean, that's a monster.
Notre Dame offensive tackle.
Yeah, I'm drafting Joe Alt, and then I'm adding in the qualifier that Michael Penix is not a top 10 pick, that he's somewhere, let's just say in the 20s. And then, the Patriots do their draft homework. They know where teams are going to go at certain spots, like they did last year with the Jets and all that. They trade next year's first round pick, whatever else they have to do to trade back into the first round to get their quarterback. They get their tackle, they get their quarterback. If they believe in Penix, I mean, maybe they don't believe in Penix, right? But let's just say they do. That's what I would do. I would take the tackle for the primarily for the reason that, I think having a true franchise tackle, whether that be Trent Williams or whoever you want to talk about, it gives you multiple ways to succeed on offense. If you want to have this quarterback who can play off schedule and run around and make plays, you still need good tackle play. If you want to be a run heavy team, you need to have good tackle play. If you want to have a sort of traditional pocket passer like Mac Jones, very clearly you need good tackle play or you're screwed. It kind of, people get bored by it and it's not sexy, but at the end of the day, everything really does start on the offensive line. And if one of those guys is truly, the sort of generational talent at tackle, I think it probably would be the best thing for the organization to do that, and then do whatever else they have to do to go up and get the quarterback, whether that be Daniels, whether that be Penix. That's what I would do.
I agree. I think, as I mentioned before, those three are major, gigantic holes on this team. You need to find a way to patch all three of them at some point this offseason. Obviously, drafting a tackle high in the draft would be the least sexy way to do it. But if you're someone who's spent the last 2-3 years complaining about how bad the Patriots offensive line is, then you can't also say, what are they doing? Why are they drafting a tackle at 4 overall? It's going to be a situation where if I'm them, I think it's a much better call to draft a tackle in that spot than reach on a quarterback that maybe deserves to go in, I don't know, in the late teens or the 20s or something like that, just because you have a hole there. Because it sounds like, I mean, obviously we'll dive much more into these quarterbacks over these next couple of months, but I don't think anybody views any of these guys beyond Williams and May as kind of no doubt NFL starter, like Pro Bowl type players. And even both of those guys might not get to that level. So I think any of that second tier that you're drafting, you're not going to say, okay, well, we got this guy. He's automatically going to be our franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. Now we'll figure everything else out around him. It's doesn't really seem like there's that caliber of player available after maybe the first pick or two.
Yeah, well, and so to that end, we kind of talked about what you do if you finish outside the top three. But what if they do finish at third? What if they get the third overall pick, which I think most people think, let's say Williams and May go first and second overall. Third is Marvin Harrison Jr., who's the best receiver prospect. I don't know. Who's the last guy that had this much? Is it Calvin Johnson? Who is the receiver drafted highest since Calvin Johnson? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Jamar Chase, maybe. I think he was like 5th or 6th overall.
Yep, I think
he had a lot of hype going in. But I would say, yeah, Harrison's been the most hyped receiver prospect in quite a while.
Yeah. So the question there is, and I guess this is assuming that the Patriots don't just then take Jaden Daniels third overall. I mean, that certainly is possible if they really like him. But let's say, they get that third pick. What do you think they should do? Take Marvin Harrison, take the tackle, or trade down and take the tackle at 6, 7, 8, whatever it may be, because they would probably get some outrageous offers for teams that look at Marvin Harrison and think, oh my God, what he would do for our offense, like Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, that kind of thing. Because I think some people look at it and say, you need the quarterback first, but and more in today's NFL, in certain cases, the receiver can make the quarterback. I think that's especially true maybe when you look at someone like Tua Tagovailoa. So what would you do, Zach, if they get the third pick?
I think that's probably the most fascinating position that they could land in, because you get the possibility of trading up into the top 2 if you really want to get one of those top quarterbacks, drafting Marvin Harrison, drafting a tackle at that third spot, or trading down a little bit and then maybe drafting a tackle. I mean, the most difficult part with all this is that we don't know if Bill Belichick is going to be running this draft, because right. I can't envision Bill Belichick using the third overall pick on a wide receiver, even one as talented as Marvin Harrison is. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that. I just would be surprised if he did it. I think the most likely scenario in that is maybe trade down 1 or 2 spots and draft a tackle and see what else if you can get a future first or 2 seconds or something, if you can get a legitimate package for that, I think you consider it. But I don't know. That's the thing that makes it so difficult to predict all this, is that you could easily have a new regime that comes in and we have no idea what they're going to be valuing, what their kind of positional priorities will be, what kind of prospects they like at certain spots. I think the Patriots would benefit from deviating from some of their draft strategies, because it obviously hasn't worked especially well in recent years. But yeah, I think that number 3 spot is if you're looking for peak chaos and peak movement opportunities, I think that is the number 1 spot for that.
Yeah, I think what I would do is similar to what I said at 4 and 5 when I said take the tackle. I would take Marvin Harrison, and then I would figure out what I have to do to trade back into the first round to get the quarterback. You can do it. You just have to pay the price. You can pull that off. It wouldn't be that outrageous. But receivers with that kind of talent don't come available this often. And I just think don't get too cute. Just take the player. But I also don't think we can discount the role that ownership could have in this. I mean, I know they don't like to meddle, to their credit. But regardless of which head coach is in charge, like if I'm if I'm the Crafts, I'm looking at it, I'm like, don't don't tell me you're going to take a tackle at the third overall pick, or trade down to take a tackle, because the kind of instant overnight buzz that Marvin Harrison Jr. would add to the franchise. And this is not insignificant stuff. The jersey sales, the butts in the seats. I mean, the season tickets and all that kind of stuff are a big deal for them. And we remember the letter that they sent out last year. I mean, this is stuff that's very front of mind for ownership in the Crafts. And so I mean, I don't know if they would do this, but it just wouldn't shock me, if they were of the mindset, like, take the superstar Justin Jefferson player that's going to make us interesting, get us back on primetime games, put butts in the seats, all that kind of stuff. And then you have the open sort of checkbook or whatever you need to do to trade back into the round to get your precious tackle or your quarterback or whatever it may be. So I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. and, it wouldn't surprise me if that's how the Crafts feel too.
I think that would be the most fun outcome too, from our perspective, from someone who has to cover this team and write about this team. Get the superstar wide receiver. Then if they're able to get one of those tier 2 type quarterbacks later in the first round, you get a standout rookie wideout, pair him with a young quarterback, see what happens from there. Obviously, you still have to address the tackle situation at some point, but yeah, in terms of entertainment value, I think that would be probably number one.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I guess maybe we can kind of finish on this note.
We're going to have this conversation like 100 more times over the next couple of months.
Right. But we can finish on this note that how far is there a scenario in your mind where you think, based on how the draft goes, that they can turn things around and be a contender as soon as next season? I mean, and it sounds crazy, but look at the Texans.
I was just going to say, look at Houston. Yeah, I think it's possible. I think they have talent on this team. I think their defense is reasonably well positioned, especially if Christian Gonzalez comes back and looks like he did early in the year. And if they can patch some of those holes on offense, then yeah, they're a team that can definitely be back in the mix next year. That's not something that I would predict at this point, just based on everything that we've seen over these last couple of months. But yeah, I don't think it needs to be a full overhaul in terms of, you have some pretty important positions to most likely replace. But yeah, I don't think this is necessarily going to be a 5-6 year kind of trust the process type rebuild. I do think that they can be competitive next year, just because, yeah, as you mentioned, we've seen it with the Texans this season.
Yeah, and I look at it and I say, they're set up, that they have the pieces on defense. Like, yeah, there are some things there they got to figure out. Maybe they probably need to go out and get another corner with Jack Jones gone and Jonathan Jones getting older. But for the most part, they have the pieces on defense. And on offense, I think re-sign Mike Onwenu and make him right tackle. Stop messing around. He's your right tackle. Pay him as such. It is what it is. And then, I think they're good on the interior. I mean, we can talk about Cole Strange and whether he even deserved to be a third round pick. But I think regardless, he's your left guard. David Andrews is an elite center. I think whether it be Sidy Sow or Antonio Mafi or Jake Andrews, who knows, you have enough options there at right guard to figure that out. And then left tackle is left tackle. We'll address this in the offseason. It is what it is. But then at receiver, if you get someone like Marvin Harrison, who can contribute right away, which is what these receivers can do now, Demario Douglas takes a year 2 leap. You franchise Hunter Henry, which I think is an obvious move because it's not going to cost them that much. And he's a leader in that locker room, and he's not a star tight end, but he's a solid tight end. Then maybe go out in the second round and draft, the next tight end, whoever that may be. And then go out and spend money and sign a receiver, a real, to upgrade over Devontae Parker or Juju Smith-Schuster. I think all of those are fairly accomplishable this offseason. Through the draft and in free agency and maybe a trade. Obviously, the variable is the quarterback. Is it Mac Jones? Is it Kirk Cousins? Is it a rookie quarterback? Who knows? But if they can somehow find a way to get solid quarterback play, easier said than done, I think they can fill out the rest of the roster more quickly than people realize to get back into at least playoff contention.
I agree. And they're going to have a ton of cap space to do it, close to 100 million.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, the first big question is deciding who is in charge of that rebuild and that restructure, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, they have the resources. They'll almost certainly have a very high draft pick, and they got a ton of money to play with. So yeah, I think this is a team that's going to look substantially different next year. It has to look substantially different, especially on offense. But yeah, I thought that they were going to be competitive this year. So I think that they have enough pieces around them with those necessary corrections that they can at very least be back up in the mix in 2024.
Yeah. So let's end on that note. The Patriots, contenders in 2024. They're 2-9.
This was a wild roller coaster. We went from just absolute redefining of rock bottom to coming out the other side being, hey, Patriots, AFC East champs 2024.
Oh my God, Stockholm syndrome or whatever. Yeah, we started with 2-9, worst team in the NFL, but they're about to contend. So just keep that in the back of the mind. All right, well that's going to be enough for us here on this episode of the NESN Patriots podcast. You can follow me on X at Dak Randall. You can follow Zach on X. I'm wondering at what point do we stop?
I was just gonna say, when do you stop emphasizing the X?
Yeah, when do we just say X and stop?
I'm not there yet, honestly.
No, I'm gonna keep saying X or adding in the caveat. You can follow Zach on X at Zach Cox NESN, and you can follow all of NESN's Patriots coverage at NESN.com.